Ambassador Zektar of the Galactic Council stood in the pristine white chamber aboard the flagship Dominion's Pride, watching the blue-green world rotate slowly on the holographic display. 3 moons circled the planet, and its single yellow star cast warm light across continents that showed signs of primitive civilization. Cities glowed like scattered gems against the darkness, connected by thin lines of infrastructure that spoke of a species still bound to their planet's surface. "Such a waste," Zektar murmured, his 4 arms folded behind his tall, crystalline form. The Velthari had evolved past the need for flesh millennia ago, their consciousness housed in living crystal that could withstand the vacuum of space. They show promise, but they're in a way. High Commander Thexlar, a massive being whose armored carapace had been forged in the heart of a dying star, stepped forward. His species, the Corvin, had conquered 47 systems before joining the Council voluntarily. The hyperspace route to the Andromeda Spiral passes directly through their system. The Council has voted. They must be relocated. Or eliminated, added Counselor Nixera, her ethereal form flickering between dimensions. The spectra existed partially outside normal space-time, making them invaluable for long-range reconnaissance. My scouts report they call themselves humans. Bipedal, carbon-based, incredibly short-lived. Average lifespan barely reaches 100 of their years. Zektar nodded, accessing the cultural databases people had compiled. Images flashed through his consciousness. Humans fighting with primitive weapons, destroying their own environment, engaging in countless wars over resources and ideology. Violent, territorial, and limited to a single world. No faster-than-light travel. No energy manipulation beyond basic fusion. They won't even understand what we're offering them. The hologram zoomed in on a sprawling metropolis where millions of humans moved through glass and steel structures. Vehicles crawled along designated paths. Aircraft traced lines through the atmosphere, and communication signals created an invisible web of electromagnetic chatter. It was impressive for such a young species, but laughably primitive by galactic standards. "Shall I prepare the standard relocation offer?" High Commander Thexlar asked, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. 30 standard days to evacuate, with transport provided to suitable worlds in the Outer Rim? "Make it sound generous," Zektar instructed. "These primitives respond well to the illusion of choice. Offer them 3 different worlds to choose from. Make them feel grateful for our mercy." Counsel Nixera's form solidified slightly as she accessed probability matrices from across multiple timelines. My projections show a 97% chance of immediate compliance. Species at their technological level typically panic when contacted by superior civilizations. They'll likely begin evacuation procedures within hours of receiving our message. The transmission array powered up, its crystalline components humming with energy that could pierce space-time itself. The message would reach Earth in moments, translated into every human language simultaneously through quantum linguistic algorithms that the Council had perfected over countless first contacts. "Beginning transmission," announced the ship's artificial intelligence, its voice echoing through the chamber. Message recipient: human species, planet designation Earth, 7742. Content: standard relocation directed with enhanced diplomatic language for primitive recipients. The message itself was a masterpiece of Council efficiency. It began with impressive displays of their technological superiority, showing massive ships that could crack continents and weapons that could ignite atmospheres. Then came the reasonable offer: peaceful relocation to worlds that would suit their biological needs, complete with assistance in establishing new colonies. The alternative was left unspoken, but clearly implied. Zektar watched as the quantum transmission reached Earth's atmosphere, infiltrating every communication network simultaneously. Television broadcasts, internet servers, radio waves, even primitive satellite networks all received the message at precisely the same moment. No human would be able to claim ignorance of the Council's generous offer. "How long until we receive their response?" he asked. Based on their communication technology, approximately 6 of their hours for initial panic responses, then formal governmental replies within 12 hours. Thexlar replied, "Their leaders will need time to convene and discuss surrender terms." The 3 council members settled in to wait, confident in their assessment. They had overseen hundreds of such relocations across dozens of galaxies. Some species resisted initially, requiring demonstrations of power, but none had ever been foolish enough to actually fight back. The mathematics were too obvious. Primitive single-world civilizations against combined might of thousands of advanced species. As Earth completed another rotation, the first responses began arriving. Zektar accessed them through his consciousness, expecting the usual mixture of fear, desperation, and eventual submission that characterized first contact with developing species. Instead, he found something unprecedented. The responses weren't pleas for mercy or desperate attempts at negotiation. They weren't even expressions of fear. Every single message, from every human government and organization, contained the same basic sentiment expressed in hundreds of different ways. Thank you for your message. After careful consideration, we must respectfully decline your offer. Earth is our home, and we're staying. Please reconsider your need for this particular hyperspace route. Zektar's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. This isn't possible. They're refusing to leave? High Commander Thexlar accessed the same data stream, his massive form growing still. They're not just refusing. They're being polite about it, as if they think we'll simply accept their decision and leave. Counselor Nixera flickered between dimensions rapidly, her consciousness racing through probability matrices that suddenly made no sense. The projections showed 97% compliance. These readings, they indicate absolute certainty in their decision. No fear, no hesitation. It's as if they don't understand what we're capable of. The silence in the chamber stretched as the three beings tried to process something that had never happened in the recorded history of galactic expansion. A primitive species had just told the Galactic Council no, and expected that to be the end of the conversation. Zektar's voice carried a new note of uncertainty. Send another message. Perhaps they didn't understand the consequences of refusal. The second message from the Galactic Council arrived exactly 24 hours later, and this time there was no attempt at diplomacy. Admiral Sarah Chun watched the transmission in the Pentagon Situation Room, surrounded by the world's most powerful leaders who had gathered within hours of the first contact. The holographic display showed Council warships in perfect formation, their weapons charging with energy that could vaporize mountains. Citizens of Earth, the crystalline being's voice echoed through every speaker on the planet simultaneously. You have failed to comprehend the gravity of your situation. We are not making a request. This is your final notice. Evacuate your world within 29 days, or face the consequences of defying the Galactic Council. The transmission showed footage of other worlds that had resisted. Entire continents cracked open like eggshells. Oceans boiled away in seconds. Cities that had stood for millennia reduced to glowing craters in the time it took to draw breath. The message was clear. This was a fate awaiting any species foolish enough to challenge galactic authority. President Martinez turned to Admiral Chin as the transmission ended. Sarah, give me an honest assessment. Can we fight them? Admiral Chun had spent 30 years in the Navy, commanded nuclear submarines, and overseen the development of humanity's most advanced weapon systems. She was known for brutal honesty in impossible situations. Mr. President, with conventional weapons, we might as well throw rocks at the sun. Their smallest ship could probably take out our entire Pacific Fleet. But Secretary of Defense Williams prompted, sensing there was more. But we're not talking about conventional warfare. Chin continued, accessing files that had been classified beyond top secret until 12 hours ago. When I was a junior officer, I thought our nuclear arsenal was our ultimate deterrent. Then I learned about the black projects, weapons we built but never tested because they scared us too much to use. The room fell silent as she activated a holographic display, showing facilities hidden deep underground, in ocean trenches, and carved into mountainsides across the globe. Project Damocles, Project Lazarus, the Aurora Initiative. For 70 years, we've been preparing for threats we couldn't even imagine. Some of our scientists theorized that first contact might not be friendly. Russian Premier Volkov leaned forward. You're talking about weapons that could damage ships that advanced. I'm talking about weapons that could crack planets, Chin replied quietly. We assumed any hostile aliens would have technology beyond our understanding. So we didn't try to match their technology. We went in the opposite direction entirely. She brought up classified footage from a test site in the Australian outback. The screen showed a device no larger than a briefcase, placed in the center of a 100-square-kilometer facility filled with monitoring equipment. When activated, reality itself seemed to bend around the device before space-time snapped back with devastating force. Quantum cascade weapons that unravel the fundamental forces holding matter together. Dimensional bombs that create artificial black holes. Viral nanotechnology that can consume any material, including the exotic alloys those ships are probably made from. Chen's voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. We built them because we're paranoid, and we never use them because we're not insane. Prime Minister Nakamura from Japan spoke carefully. You're suggesting we escalate to weapons of mass destruction immediately? I'm suggesting we remind these council members that humanity didn't climb to the top of our food chain by being reasonable, Chen replied. Every species on our planet that tried to make us extinct learned the same lesson. We don't fight fair, we don't surrender, and we definitely don't evacuate. The debate that followed lasted 6 hours and involved every major world leader. Some argued for attempting negotiation. Others suggested partial evacuation to buy time. A few proposed immediate surrender, hoping the Council would allow human civilization to continue on the promised new worlds. Admiral Chen watched them argue with growing frustration, until finally she stood, her voice cutting through the diplomatic chatter. With respect, you're all missing the point. They made a mistake when they sent us footage of worlds they've destroyed. They showed us exactly what they're planning to do to Earth. She activated another holographic display, this one showing Earth from space with trajectory lines marking the Council's expected approach vectors. Look at their formations. Look at their weapon positions. They're not preparing for a fight. They're positioning for an execution. They expect us to spend the next 29 days panicking and loading onto their transport ships like cattle. What are you proposing? President Martinez asked. I'm proposing we give them the fight they're not expecting, Chen replied. Not in 29 days when they're ready for resistance. Right now, while they think we're helpless. The silence that followed was broken by a communication from the International Space Station. Commander Thompson's voice crackled through the speakers. Ground control, we have movement in the Council fleet. 12 ships breaking formation and heading toward Earth orbit. ETA approximately 4 hours. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. They're sending a demonstration force. Probably planning to destroy a few empty cities to show us they're serious. Perfect. Perfect. Premier Volkov demanded. They're splitting their forces and moving into our space, Chen explained, pulling up tactical displays that showed weapon positions hidden across Earth's surface and in orbit. For the first time in this conflict, we have advantages they don't know about. They think we're primitive. They think we're helpless. They think we'll panic. She turned to face the assembled leaders, her expression carrying the cold certainty of someone who had stared down nuclear war and never blinked. Instead, we're going to show them what happens when you threaten humanity's home. We're going to hit them with everything we've got all at once before they know what's happening. And if we lose? Secretary Williams asked. Then we lose fighting, Chen replied. But if we win, if we actually manage to hurt them, we send a message to every species in their council. Earth isn't just another primitive world to be relocated. We're the place where galactic bullies come to die. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would not evacuate. They would not negotiate. They would not beg for mercy or hope for compassion from creatures who had already decided their fate. They would fight back with every weapon they had ever built, and some they had never dared to use. The Council fleet approached Earth expecting to find a world in chaos, its population desperately preparing for evacuation. Instead, they found something that had never appeared in their probability matrices, a species that had received their ultimatum, calculated the odds, and decided that some things were worth dying for. As the 12 ships entered Earth's orbit, Admiral Chen gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. All units, weapons free. Show them what humanity thinks of their generous offer. Commander Velfak of the Council's demonstration fleet had participated in over 300 world pacifications during his long career. The routine was always the same, a show of overwhelming force, the destruction of a few strategic targets, and inevitable surrender of the primitive species below. As a squad of 12 heavy cruisers entered Earth's orbital space, he expected nothing different from these self-proclaimed humans. The first indication that something was wrong came from a sensor operator. "Commander, I'm detecting energy readings from the planet's surface. Multiple sources, scattered across all continents." Velthak barely glanced at the displays. "Local power grids reacting to our presence. These primitives probably don't even understand what they're seeing." He opened a communication channel to the planet below. "Attention, inhabitants of Earth. You are witnessing the power of the Galactic Council. We will now provide a demonstration of what awaits those who defy our authority." He selected a target at random, a sprawling metropolis that showed high population density. The city would make an excellent example. His ship's primary weapon began charging, energy cascading through crystalline conduits that could focus stellar fire into a beam capable of melting continents. The attack came from everywhere at once. Earth's surface erupted with weapons that violated everything the Council understood about primitive technology. Particle beams that shouldn't have been possible with their metallurgy sliced through the vacuum of space. Quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously phased through his shields as if they weren't there. Most impossibly, the planet's moon opened like a flower, revealing a weapon that made his ship's computers scream warnings in languages he didn't recognize. "Evasive maneuvers!" Velthak shouted, but it was too late. The humans hadn't waited for his demonstration. They hadn't panicked or tried to negotiate. They had simply opened fire with weapons that should have been impossible for their species to possess. His flagship, the Terror's Edge, shuddered as quantum missiles punched through its primary armor. The ship had been designed to withstand the collapse of suns, but whatever the humans were using operated on entirely different principles. Instead of overwhelming his defenses, their weapons simply ignored them, attacking the fundamental forces that held his ship together. "Commander, we're losing structural integrity across all decks," his engineer reported. "These weapons, they're not destroying our systems. They're making them forget how to exist." Through the chaos of battle, Velthak watched in horror as 3 of his cruisers simply stopped. Not destroyed, not disabled, but frozen in space as if time itself had abandoned them. Their crews were still alive, still moving, but their ships had become monuments to impossibility, trapped in temporal loops that would hold them forever. The 4th ship met a different fate. A weapon fired from Earth's Arctic region struck it with a beam of pure entropy, and the massive vessel began aging at an accelerated rate. Millions of years passed in seconds. Hull plates corroded. Systems failed from where they should have taken eons, and finally the ship crumbled to dust, its atoms scattered by solar wind. "This isn't possible." Velthak transmitted desperately to the main Council fleet. "They're using weapons that violate the fundamental laws of physics. How did a primitive species develop technology beyond our understanding?" The answer came not from his superiors, but from an open human transmission broadcast on all frequencies. Admiral Chen's voice echoed to the emptiness of space with calm, professional authority. "Council Fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force. You asked how we developed these weapons. The answer is simple. We've been paranoid for a very long time. We spent decades preparing for threats we couldn't imagine, and you turned out to be exactly what we were afraid of." On Velthak's main screen, Earth itself seemed to transform. Hidden installations revealed themselves across every continent. The planet's rings, which the Council had dismissed as natural debris, unfolded into massive weapon platforms. Even Earth's artificial satellites, which had seemed like primitive communication devices, began moving with purpose, revealing themselves as defensive systems that had been disguised for decades. "We know you have more ships coming," Chin continued. "We know your main fleet could probably destroy our planet, if you were willing to pay the price. But here's what you didn't know about humans. We don't just build weapons to fight our enemies. We build them to make our enemies wish they had never found us." 2 more Council ships vanished, not destroyed but erased from reality by weapons that attacked the concept of their existence. Velthak watched his tactical display shrink from 12 ships to 7, then to 4, as humanity demonstrated technologies that made the Council's greatest achievements look like children's toys. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice breaking with panic for the first time in 3 centuries of military service. All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace. But when his navigator tried to engage the faster-than-light drive, nothing happened. The space around Earth had been altered somehow, creating a bubble where the laws of physics operated according to human preferences rather than universal constants. "They're jamming hyperspace," his navigator reported, voice hollow with disbelief. "The entire system is locked down. We can't leave." Admiral Chen's transmission continued, her tone never changing from professional courtesy. "We've established what your people call an interdiction field around our system. No one leaves until we're finished talking. Don't worry, it won't hurt you. We just want to make sure you understand our position clearly. Of the original 12 ships, only Velthak's flagship remained functional. The others have been destroyed, erased, frozen in time, or simply convinced by human weapons that they had never existed in the first place." His crew stared at their instruments in shock, trying to process the impossible readings their sensors were providing. "Now," Chin continued, "here's our counteroffer to your evacuation demand. Take your remaining ship back to your council. Tell them that Earth is not available for their hyperspace route. Tell them that humans are not interested in relocation. Tell them that if they want to fight, we're ready." The interdiction field flickered, creating a narrow corridor leading away from Earth. "You have 1 hour to leave our system," Chin added. "After that, we'll assume you're staying permanently, and we'll treat you accordingly." Velthak didn't hesitate. His ship limped toward the escape corridor, systems failing and hull plates scarred by weapons that shouldn't have existed. As Earth fell behind them, his communications officer managed to establish contact with the main Council fleet. "This is Commander Velthak to Council Command," he transmitted, his voice carrying the weight of impossible defeat. "The humans, they're not what we thought. They're not primitive. They're not helpless. And they're definitely not leaving their world." He paused, looking back at the blue planet that had just rewritten everything the galaxy thought it knew about primitive species. "Council Command, we need to reconsider our approach. These beings didn't just refuse our ultimatum. They laughed at it, and then they proved they had every right to laugh." The response from Ambassador Zektar came immediately, filled with disbelief and growing rage. "Impossible. No single world species could possess such technology. You must have encountered an unknown Council fleet operating in violation of our treaties." "Sir," Velthak replied quietly, "I've been fighting for the Council for 3 centuries. I know our weapons, our ships, our capabilities. What I saw down there wasn't Council technology. It was something else entirely. Something that made our greatest achievements look like toys in comparison." The silence that followed stretched across space, carrying with it the growing realization that the galaxy's most powerful alliance had just been humiliated by a species they considered beneath notice. Earth had drawn first blood, and the Galactic Council was about to learn why some fight should never be started. In the depths of the Council's primary command ship, Ambassador Zektar stood before the assembled representatives of 47 starfaring civilizations, each one struggling to process the impossible reports flowing in from a human system. The holographic display showed tactical recordings from Commander Velthak's defeated squadron, and with each replay, the silence in the chamber grew heavier. "These readings must be falsified," declared Supreme Marshal Crothnell of the Hegemony, his 6 eyes fixed on footage of Council ships being erased from existence. "No species achieves such technological advancement in isolation. They must have received aid from a rival faction." High Counselor Nixera flickered between dimensions as she accessed data streams from across the galaxy. "My scouts report no unknown fleets in the region, no missing Council technology, no evidence of external interference. The humans appear to have developed these capabilities independently." The word independently hung in the air like a death sentence. In 10,000 years of galactic civilization, no species had ever made the leap from planetary to stellar technology without guidance from established powers. The mathematical impossibility of it violated every principle the Council used to maintain order across the stars. "Show me their planet again," Zektar commanded, his crystalline form pulsing with frustration. The hologram shifted to display Earth in perfect detail, and this time the assembled Council members could see what their sensors had missed before. What they had taken for a primitive world was actually a fortress that had been preparing for exactly this moment. The planet's magnetic field had been artificially enhanced to serve as a shield. Its moon was hollow, converted into a weapon platform centuries ago. Even the asteroid belt showed signs of modification, with mining operations that had been disguised as natural formations. How long? High Commander Thexlar asked, his massive form trembling with the implications. How long have they been preparing for us? Dr. Elena Vasquez answered from the surface of Earth, her transmission cutting through Council encryption as if it didn't exist. The human scientist appeared as a hologram in their command chamber, calm and professional despite addressing beings who could destroy her world with a thought. About 300 years, she said conversationally. We started seriously preparing for a hostile first contact around 1700, when we realized that mathematics suggested we weren't alone in the universe. By 1800, we had established a framework for what would become the Defense Initiative. We've been building weapons to fight starfaring civilizations since before we could leave our own atmosphere. The council chamber erupted in disbelief. Species simply didn't develop faster-than-light countermeasures before achieving faster-than-light travel. It was like building a submarine before inventing the wheel. Impossible, Cravenel declared. You're claiming your species spent centuries preparing for a threat that might never have materialized? Dr. Vasquez smiled, and somehow that expression was more terrifying than any weapon the Council had ever faced. Marshal, with respect, you're thinking like a civilized being. Humans aren't civilized. We're survivors. We prepare for every possible disaster, including ones that sound completely insane. We've been building weapons to fight God since we invented religion. She gestured, and the hologram showed human cities where every building, every road, every seemingly innocent structure had been designed with defense in mind. We didn't know what you would look like or what technology you would use, so we prepared for everything. Weapons that work against energy beings, weapons that target crystalline life forms, weapons that can kill creatures that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Council Nixera's form solidified completely for the first time in decades as the implications hit her. You built weapons specifically designed to kill us, each of us individually. Among others, Vasquez confirmed, we have protocols for fighting hive minds, gas-based life forms, digital consciousnesses, and entities that exist purely as information. We even have contingencies for dealing with creatures that can manipulate time, reality, or the fundamental forces of the universe. The silence that followed was broken by Admiral Chen's voice joining the transmission. Dr. Vasquez is being modest. She's one of the architects of the Omega protocols. The weapons you encountered today were from our standard defensive systems. If you force us to activate Omega, well, let's just say we'll be having this conversation in a very different universe. Ambassador Zektar's form flared with desperate authority. You cannot threaten the Galactic Council. We represent the combined might of 47 star systems. Our fleets number in the millions. And we represent one world. Admiral Chen replied, one small, blue world that you decided to threaten. Do you know what the difference is between us and every other species you've bullied into submission? She paused, letting the question hang in space between them. We're not impressed by big numbers. We've survived ice ages that lasted millennia, plagues that killed half our population, and wars that turned entire continents into graveyards. We've faced extinction so many times that we developed a cultural reflex. When something threatens to destroy us, we destroy it first. The tactical display updated, showing the Council's main fleet position at the edge of the solar system. 2,000 ships, each one capable of sterilizing worlds, arranged in perfect battle formation. It should have been an overwhelming display of force. Instead, it looked like a target. We've been monitoring your fleet positions, Chen continued. Impressive formation, by the way. Very disciplined. Very predictable. Very vulnerable. Vulnerable? High Commander Thexlar demanded. You're one world against 2,000 ships. We're one world that spent 3 centuries preparing to fight 2,000 ships, Chen corrected. Did you really think we'd build all these wonderful weapons and not find a way to deliver them to your fleet? The answer came from the depths of space itself. What the Council had assumed were natural comets began changing course, their trajectories shifting to intercept the fleet. What they had taken for space debris revealed guidance systems and weapon arrays. What they had dismissed as background radiation resolved into a network of automated systems that had been watching them since they entered the galaxy. You see, Dr. Vasquez explained, we solved a fundamental equation centuries ago. How does a single world fight a galactic empire? The answer is, you don't fight the empire. You fight the concept of empire itself. The first human devices reached the Council fleet, and reality began to change around them. These weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They were philosophical statements expressed through applied physics. The ships didn't explode or burn. Instead, they began to question their own existence, their crews slowly realizing that perhaps conquest wasn't as important as they had thought. We call it a democracy virus, Chin said cheerfully. It's a mimetic weapon that spreads a radical idea that maybe species should be allowed to govern themselves. Very dangerous to authoritarian power structures. Across the Council fleet, crews began asking questions that had never occurred to them before. Why were they invading peaceful worlds? What gave them the right to relocate entire civilizations? Wouldn't their resources be better spent helping rather than conquering? The virus spread from ship to ship through communication networks, carried by the very coordination systems that made the fleet effective. Within hours, the Council's perfectly disciplined armada had dissolved into 2,000 individual ships whose crews were suddenly much more interested in philosophy than warfare. Ambassador Zektar watched his galactic empire crumble in real time, undone not by superior firepower, but by a species that had weaponized doubt itself. "This is impossible," he whispered, his crystalline form dimming with despair. "No," Admiral Chin replied. "This is humanity, and we're just getting started." "This is impossible," he whispered, his crystalline form dimming with despair. "No," Admiral Chin replied. "This is humanity, and we're just getting started." 6 months after the first contact that was supposed to end with Earth's evacuation, the galaxy looked very different. The Galactic Council's authority had crumbled not through military defeat, but through something far more dangerous. The spread of ideas that made their subjects question why they needed to be ruled at all. Ambassador Zektar stood in what had once been the Council's supreme command chamber, now converted into something the humans called a diplomatic forum. Representatives from hundreds of worlds that had never been allowed to speak for themselves filled the space, their voices creating a chaos of debate that his crystalline consciousness found both fascinating and terrifying. "The motion before us," announced President Martinez, who had somehow become the moderator of these proceedings, "is whether to establish the Galactic Cooperative, a voluntary alliance based on mutual aid rather than imperial authority." All voices would be heard. The irony wasn't lost on Zektar. Humanity had defeated the galaxy's greatest empire not by destroying it, but by transforming it into something unrecognizable. The Council's perfect order had been replaced by messy, chaotic democracy, and somehow that chaos was proving more effective than millennia of authoritarian rule. The Velthari delegation wishes to speak. He found himself saying the word strange in his synthetic throat. 6 months ago, he would have issued decrees. Now he asked permission to be heard, and somehow that felt better. The floor recognizes Ambassador Zektar. Martinez replied with the same professional courtesy she'd shown when his people were threatening to destroy her world. Zektar's form shifted colors as he struggled to express thoughts that would have been heretical under the old regime. For 10,000 years, the Council maintained order through fear. We told ourselves this was necessary, that primitive species needed guidance, that chaos would result from self-governance. He gestured to the assembled representatives, beings from worlds that had been conquered, relocated, or simply ignored by Council policy. We were wrong. Not just strategically wrong, but fundamentally wrong about the nature of civilization itself. The chamber fell silent as one of the galaxy's former rulers publicly acknowledged what everyone now understood. The Council had been built on lies that even they had come to believe. "The humans showed us something that should have been obvious," Zektar continued. "When you threaten someone's home, they don't calculate odds or surrender to superior force. They fight back. And when they fight back, they fight with everything they have, everything they are, and everything they might become." Admiral Chun, who had been quietly observing from the back of the chamber, stepped forward. "Ambassador, with respect, You're still missing the point. We didn't just fight back against the Council. We fought back against the idea that bigger always means better, that older civilizations have the right to bully younger ones. She activated a holographic display, showing the current state of the galaxy, where the Council's rigid territorial boundaries had once divided space into neat administrative regions. Now there was a complex web of voluntary alliances, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts that the humans had helped negotiate. The real weapon we used against you wasn't our technology, Chin explained. It was the simple idea that different species might be better at different things, and that cooperation works better than conquest. The Council spent 10,000 years trying to make the galaxy conform to their vision. We spent 6 months helping the galaxy figure out its own vision. The truth of this was evident in the statistics flowing across the display. Worlds that had been strip-mined for resources under Council rule were now thriving as trade centers. Species that had been classified as primitive were contributing innovations that advanced civilizations had never considered. The galaxy was becoming richer, more diverse, and more stable than it had ever been under centralized authority. But how do you maintain order without authority? Asked High Commander Thexlar, his massive form hunched with confusion. The Corvin had spent his entire existence believing that peace came through strength, that stability required hierarchy. Dr. Vasquez smiled from her position at the human delegation table. Commander, you're assuming that order and authority are the same thing. They're not. Real order comes from everyone agreeing to work together, because they want to, not because they're forced to. She gestured to a holographic model showing trade routes, communication networks, and defense agreements that had spontaneously emerged as the galaxy reorganized itself. Look at what happened when we removed the Council's control systems. Did everything collapse into chaos? No. It organized itself into something more complex and more resilient than anything you had before. The evidence was undeniable. Conflicts that had simmered for millennia under Council rule had been resolved through negotiation between the affected parties. Scientific advances that had been stalled by bureaucratic oversight were now proceeding at unprecedented rates. Even former enemies were finding common ground when they weren't being manipulated by imperial policy. The humans called emergent order, explained Council Nixera, her form more stable than it had been in centuries. Complex systems that organize themselves naturally when allowed to develop without external control. We spent so long imposing order from above that we forgot systems to create order from within. Ambassador Zektar found himself laughing, a sound his species hadn't made in eons. We were so afraid of chaos that we created it. Our rigid control systems generated the very conflicts we claimed to prevent. We were the source of galactic instability, not its solution. President Martinez nodded thoughtfully. That's the thing about bullies, Ambassador. They always claim they're keeping the peace, but they're usually the main reason peace is necessary in the first place. The session continued for hours, with species after species sharing stories of how their worlds had changed since the Council's authority had dissolved. The pattern was consistent. Removal of external control had led not to chaos, but to innovation, cooperation, and genuine stability based on mutual benefit rather than mutual fear. As the formal proceedings wound down, Admiral Chin found herself standing beside Ambassador Zektar at the massive viewing port that showed Earth hanging in space like a small blue jewel. The planet looked exactly as it had 6 months ago, but somehow everything had changed. Do you regret it? Zektar asked quietly. Your people could have accepted our offer. You could have lived peacefully on one of the worlds we selected for you. Chun considered the question seriously. Ambassador, peaceful extinction is still extinction. You were asking us to stop being human and become something safer, something more convenient for your empire. We couldn't do that. Even knowing the risks? Even knowing you might have lost everything. Especially knowing the risks, Chin replied. That's what makes us human. We'd rather die as ourselves than live as someone else's idea of what we should be. She pointed to the ships moving through Earth's orbital space, vessels from dozens of different species, working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old regime. But look what we got instead. Not just survival, but the chance to build something better than what came before. Ambassador Zektar's crystalline form pulsed with something that might have been admiration. The Council made many mistakes, Admiral, But perhaps our greatest was assuming that strength meant the ability to destroy. Your people taught us that real strength is the ability to create something worth protecting. And now you're part of it, Jim pointed out. The Galactic Cooperative isn't human-run. It's not run by anyone. It's what happens when you let civilizations figure out how to work together, instead of forcing them to work for someone. As if to emphasize her point, an alert chimed through the chamber. A new species had been detected at the edge of the galaxy, their first radio transmissions just reaching the established civilizations. Under the old regime, this would have triggered mobilization protocols and invasion plans. Instead, it triggered something unprecedented. A volunteer mission to make peaceful contact and offer assistance to a young civilization taking its first steps into the broader universe. The floor recognizes a motion to dispatch a first-contact diplomatic mission, President Martinez announced. Volunteer crews from Earth, Veldar Prime, and the Corvin Republic have offered to serve. Ambassador Zektar watched former enemies working together to welcome new voices to the galactic community, and he finally understood what the humans had really accomplished. They hadn't just defeated the Council's fleet. They had defeated the Council's entire worldview and replaced it with something that made defeat impossible because everyone was on the same side. Admiral Chun, he said quietly, I believe I understand now why your people were so confident when you refused our ultimatum. Oh, Chun raised an eyebrow. Why is that? Because you weren't just fighting for your world, Zektar replied. You were fighting for every world. You knew that if you could change our minds instead of destroying our ships, you could save everyone. Chin smiled, the same expression that had terrified the galaxy 6 months ago, now filled with genuine warmth. Ambassador, welcome to humanity. We've been waiting for you to join us. And in that moment, as representatives of hundreds of civilizations worked together to extend welcome to yet another new voice in the galactic chorus, it became clear that Earth's vengeance had been the most terrible kind imaginable. The vengeance of transformation, of making enemies into friends, of turning conquest into cooperation. The Galactic Council had sent Earth a threat, expecting submission. Earth had responded with something far more dangerous than violence. They had responded with hope. And now that hope was spreading across the stars, carried by former conquerors who had learned that the strongest empires were built not on fear, but on friendship freely given and gratefully received. The galaxy would never be the same. Galactic Council sent Earth a threat. Earth responded with a vengeance.